Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Homeowners insurance increasing or deductible too high? Call, click, or come in. Save a Dave. Dave Miette Insurance Agency.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about what's going on with the home teams. We'll talk about the Saints. We'll talk about the Pelicans. Obviously, it's draft day for the Pels. We'll talk some LSU, Tulane. Also, we'll talk some high school sports, specifically Arch Manning committing today. All that coming up here on the program and more. And joining us on the program from NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, and also Fox 8 Sports is Jeff Duncan. Jeff, welcome to the show. Always good to have you, my friend. How are you?
Doing great, Eric. Trying to, like everyone else in New Orleans and the South, trying to survive this heat wave. But could be changing soon if I get a chance to take a little vacation.
Hopefully so. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on. Now you got a book that you're working on right now. Also, what's happening at NOLA.com and Fox 8.
Well, I know we're going to talk about the Arch Manning commitment. Right. That's big news, so I'm writing on that. I'm sure that'll be posted soon, a column on that recruitment, which is unprecedented, I think, in our coverage history. And then I'll be taking some time off. Yeah. I mean, you won't see my byline on NOLA.com for a few weeks leading up to training camp.
Beautiful. Let's start there with Arch Manning. He commits to Texas today. You've been one of the closest to this situation since its inception. Talk about it. Why Texas? Why today?
Well, with everything with the Mannings, Eric, as you know, I mean, nothing occurs by happenstance. Everything's thought out, well considered, and they went through an exhaustive year-long recruiting process. His final three schools were Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. He visited each one of those schools 4 times each. So they got every question answered. They took their time, did their due diligence. And I felt all along like Texas was the leader. I think everyone close to the program felt like Texas was the school to beat. I think he developed a very close relationship with Steve Sarkisian, the head coach there, who personally was involved in his recruitment, along with A.J. Milwee, the quarterback's coach there, who worked tirelessly on this recruitment. I think Texas earned this commitment. They outworked everybody, and that's saying something because you got powerhouses in Georgia and Alabama. And I think there's also an element to this selection that I think Manning was intrigued by forging his own path away from his famous uncles, Peyton and Eli, away from his famous grandfather at Ole Miss and Tennessee and the SEC. And I know Texas is going to be a member of the SEC, but they're not viewed yet as an SEC school. And I think there was attractive to Arch to be able to kind of forge his own identity, and he's always going to have the family name with him. I mean, he elected to play quarterback being named Arch Manning.
Yes.
So he knew what was coming with that. But I think there's something that attractive to going to a neutral site, if you will, in Texas, and kind of escaping the shadows of his predecessors.
Now, Texas is supposed to be coming into the SEC in 2025. There is a buyout that both Texas and Oklahoma will have to pay if they leave earlier. We saw the American Athletic Conference defectors say they're going into the American Athletic, going into the Big 12, what is it, 2023, right?
Correct.
So, again, the question is, how quickly does that move Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC? Do you think it'll be before 2025?
Yes, I think it will. I mean, I think this lame duck status will not last 2 more seasons after this. I would not be surprised if it happened as early as 2023. I think more likely 2024.
Right.
But he will be playing in the SEC. And look, the way these timelines work with these elite recruits, these elite quarterbacks like Arch Manning, he's not going to come in and start his freshman year. He's going to basically redshirt for a year, sit behind, I think it's Brock Ewers is his name, or Quinn Ewers, who transferred. He's a Texas kid who went to Ohio State, big 5-star recruit. He's back at Austin now. He's going to start this year and next year, which would be Arch's freshman year, and then the reins will be handed over to Arch Manning, his redshirt freshman or sophomore season, and he'll have 2 years basically before he's off to the NFL.
Right, and probably those 2 years within the SEC.
Correct. I think he'll be playing SEC football.
Right, which I'm sure that I got to believe that the Mannings would like to see him in the SEC.
Yeah.
There's a legacy there.
Yeah, and I think they know that's the ultimate competition,
Right.
and so I think they're looking forward to that. And I think there's another element here is, Texas football is a Goliath. They are one of the 5. When you look at the history of college football, Texas is one of the 5 most preeminent programs of all time. They have not been that way the last 15, 20 years. There's legacy at stake here. If Arch Manning comes in and is part of resurrecting that program, if he were to lead them to a national championship, his legacy in Texas will be forever.
Yes.
He'll be much like what Peyton is like in Tennessee, where he's revered and can really do no wrong in Knoxville. That'll be the same for Arch in Texas, and I think that's attractive to him.
How good can he be? What's his ceiling?
Oh, I think he's the best quarterback I've ever seen in high school football. I mean, I don't think he has any weaknesses, at least not that I've seen. He's very athletic. Nelson Stewart, his coach there, told me that he's the fastest kid on their team right now. I think that would surprise people. I mean, he played basketball on the state championship team. He's a high jumper on the track team. He's got Archie's athleticism, Cooper's athleticism, but that mental processing power that Eli and Peyton had, and the due diligence, the practice habits, the study habits, that were legendary under Peyton Manning. He's got all that. So I think he's one of the most flawless prospects I've ever seen. He's very mature, team-oriented, already understands the concepts of leading at the quarterback position. As his grandfather, Charlie Heidenfelder, told me, he's been programmed to play quarterback. All the stuff that these kids are going to the Manning Pass Academy to get for 4 days this weekend in Thibodaux, he's had a lifetime of those lessons and instruction. He's so far ahead of his peers. I think he could step on the Texas campus and start from day one. He's not going to have to do that, but he could. He's that far along.
Speaking of Manning Passing Academy, back this weekend, it's always a showcase of, again, the nation's best quarterbacks and an opportunity for the collegiate quarterbacks to be able to be there as counselors. You've been there many, many times. For those that have not been there or know about it, describe it.
Well, it's a unique camp. I mean, it's the most prestigious passing camp in all of football. They built that over 26 years, the Mannings. And it's really interesting how they've structured it, where the camp is for the junior high and high school quarterbacks. They're the ones that are actually paying to go to the camp. But their counselors, their coaches, are all the elite college quarterbacks that are currently in college football. And this year, Eric, they've got 45 camp counselors, 45 college quarterbacks, the most they've ever had. And of that group, they've got all the top ones in the country. I think the only top quarterback in the top 20 rankings is Caleb Williams from Southern Cal, who's not there. Everyone else is there. So these college counselors get to instruct the high school and college, junior high kids, and at the same time, they have mentors like Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, some of the college coaches on the staff. They bring in some NFL scouts and coaches. They get instructions and lessons and learn for the next level, the pro level, from some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So everyone's kind of learning at a different level at this camp. It's very unique, and it's not a recruiting camp. They don't let like recruiting services in there. It's not about rankings or stars. It's all about development at the high school level. And then they do have this one fun passing competition on Friday night among the college quarterbacks. It's much like a skills competition where they have a little fun with that. But it's just a unique camp, and there's a reason these kids all want to come back year after year. The staff comes back year after year. It's so well run, which is typical of the Mannings.
And of course, Thibodeau has really gained a lot from it.
Yes.
Again, when you look at the facilities, everything else that's going on there, to be able to keep up with the camp. So again, all around, and it's a great thing for Louisiana as well. Get all these kids here. By the way, Miles Brennan will represent LSU. Michael Pratt will represent Tulane. They'll be counselors at the camp this year.
Yeah, and also LSU's other quarterbacks and all their receivers will be there participating on Saturday. It's not a public event, but they're all coming down. There's an internal event they have, kind of a skills competition, where all of LSU's quarterbacks and receivers will be taking part.
Beautiful. Let's shift gears. It is draft night, and normally we'd be going to the Saints at this time. We'll bring the Saints into the next block. Pelicans in a different situation than they were this time last year, and very much so. From again David Griffin, again the way people are feeling about him, and again what has happened in the offseason, to obviously again what we're seeing with Zion now. Very much in shape, out in the city, embracing again the city. The feeling is so much different than it was last year for the fan base as well as you go into this. First time in forever that again you don't feel like you need to have this draft pick to be able to get over the top. I'm not saying it's a luxury, but again you have a very good team, 14 spots already taken on this roster. Maybe there'll be some movement in the offseason, but for the most part, this is a complementary piece, whether it be staying at 8, moving up, moving back, or trading out and bringing a veteran in. Your thoughts on where they are first, and then we'll kind of get into the draft.
Well, I think I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's night and day to where the perception of the organization was a year ago. I think this time a year ago, David Griffin was fighting for his job and for his existence here, and now I think he's very secure. He had a hell of a year, from hiring Willie Green to the trade to get Jonas Valanciunas, to the draft, which was off the charts good. He made every right move, the trade of C.J. McCollum. So David Griffin has not only saved his job, but I think put this organization in a prime position now to where I think you could say the trajectory of the Pelicans is much more promising than even the trajectory of the New Orleans Saints, right across the parking lot from their facility. And that's a credit to this past 12 months, what they've done. Good friend of mine, Joel Myers, the play-by-play announcer for the Pelicans, said the other day, he said, the Pelicans are in such good shape right now that agents in the league are actually discouraging the Pelicans from drafting some of their clients because they know they're not going to play for the Pelicans. They're so deep right now. They're 8 or 9 deep. When's the last time that's happened? Right. So that's an indication of just how far along they are.
What do you think they do tonight? You think they hold at 8 and take the best player available? Do you think they move up?
I don't think we know.
Yeah,
I mean,
they have so many options available.
Yeah, I always say this for every draft. I mean, the people involved don't know. I mean, everyone wants to project. Right. Sometimes they may have a targeted guy and they go get him, especially the Saints. But for the most part, you're waiting on circumstances to play out before you, and you have every scenario there available to you. And I think that's what David Griffin and his staff will have determined is if there's a guy there they really want at 8, they're going to take him. If they're off the board, they'll trade down. And I think eventually that's probably what happens is they move down, maybe take somebody for somebody else, move down. They don't, like you said, they're not really in a desperate need to whoever they draft at number 8 or subsequently later is probably not going to crack their top 8 rotation this year anyway. I think they need a good wing, a 3-and-D type skill set. But whether that person contributes early on, I don't think we're going to see a Herb Jones-like impact from this draft class.
What about the school of thought of, again, that this team is close and could be a top 4 team in the West next year, and maybe, again, that 8th pick is something you can dangle for a veteran player that could maybe crack that top 8, that could maybe give you something else, or again, quality depth on this team going forward. What about that possible avenue?
I think that's a very real possibility. I mean, we've already seen reports that they're shopping Devontae Graham.
Right.
I could see them packaging the first-round pick with him to get that veteran you're talking about. They got to take into account now the salary situation, because you're getting ready to ink Zion Williamson to the biggest deal in franchise history. You've got a lot of moving parts there with trying to balance that salary cap and keep this core together. So I do think that's another reason maybe to not take on a top 8 pick, why you might trade down, why you might move that pick to get another piece, because I think this team's core is set. I don't think they need a core piece. Whatever they get in this draft, I think is going to be an ancillary down the road type of contributor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, as we said, I don't want to say this is a luxury, but because, again, we know by looking at the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals, the way the schedule is set up right now, it is a game of attrition. By the time you get into April and May, and even if you're lucky, June, got a lot of injuries usually, guys trying to come back from injuries. The deeper the team is, the better the team is. So, again, you never turn down talent. But it's such a different scenario this year than it's ever been, maybe in the history of professional basketball here in New Orleans, where you feel like, again, that we have to have this pick to be able to hold on to a player so the franchise player doesn't move on, or we have to have this pick so ultimately, again, it's another opportunity to get a starter or a first guy coming off the bench. You are in a situation where pretty much everything's in front of you. You pick what's best for the scenario for the team. Yeah,
and I'd also say this. I think it's also important to note this is not a great draft. I mean, once you get out of the top 3 to 4 players, there's not a lot of can't-miss prospects. There's questions about everyone. There might be some good role players, some good maybe players that become starters in this league that can play defined roles. But once you get out, I think the consensus is especially the top 3, maybe 4. We're talking about guys that would come in and play a role. And look, there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be a late first rounder that blossoms into a star, second rounder. But for the most part, I think that's what we're looking at.
They also have the 41st and 52nd pick in the second round. Just because of just the space on the roster, it's hard to see them, doing what they did last year with a Herb Jones, as you mentioned. Is there a chance that they might draft and stash overseas?
Yes.
Is that something that they may do? I mean, that,
Definitely.
to me, seems like the logical situation when you have these picks, because there is a plethora of picks coming over the next few years. Some of those second-round picks that you can use to be able to make a deal work. But if they're going to hold on to those picks, it seems that's the logical thing.
And that's an avenue that I think is increased with Trajan Langdon.
I agree.
And his expertise overseas. I mean, he spent a lot of his career over there, has deep connections and ties to overseas, and with this roster, the maturation level, the timeline they're on, makes sense. Draft and stash.
Let's talk about Zion Williamson. Everything he's done up to this point points to, again, a full 180 from what we saw, maybe over the last couple years. First of all, he's in incredible shape. We've seen that from the videos to, again, the photos that the Pels have put out at a New Orleans area playground the other night, playing with some kids. Again, you can see the body is just completely different. Has the personal chef now. Obviously, he's working out. The question is, at this point, 5 years, $181 million. That's the max deal. There have been talk about making sure there are protections within the contract for the club. What direction do you think they're going? Will they be protections, or at this point, will they sign him to the extension July 1st, full extension, with no ties to it?
I think there's got to be protections. I don't think you can go into this with his track record without protection. So I'll be shocked if it's not a Joel Embiid type of deal built in to protect. And I think because of that, this is going to take a little while. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'll be surprised if it does. It could. But
so it's not an Anthony Davis thing, 1201, contract.
I'll be surprised. I think because of the unique circumstances with his career so far, the club has to have some protections. And, of course, the Zion camp's going to make their case. He's a very unique player. I mean, I've talked to people in the organization before that this is a guy that puts butts in the seats. He's a guy, I have friends that have season ticket package in Biloxi Gulfport. They bought those tickets and they split them up like a lot of people do just because of Zion Williamson. People aren't as great a player as Brandon Ingram is. They're not driving in from Biloxi Gulfport to see Brandon Ingram play. they will for Zion Williamson. He's a draw like we really haven't had here, and that has value. So if I'm Zion Williamson's camp, I'm bringing up that I just got a Jordan Brand shoe released, Voodoo, basically New Orleans-based shoe. Those things come with the brand of Zion Williamson that you don't get with just the normal star player. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think eventually it gets done because I think there's motivation on both sides to compromise.
And the motivation is for Zion, he wants to play with a winning team, and the product now is a winner. And you can see the trajectory of the team right now based on what they have. Add Zion to that, and again, they're that much better. Especially a healthy Zion, a Zion that's in shape, and also a Zion that in the summer expands his game. He's got to, again, he's an incredible player inside. There's no stopping him. He's got to get better on defense, and he's got to get a mid-range game. The great ones work on something every offseason, and that to me is the next step for him.
And look, I think this time off is only going to motivate him more. I think we're seeing that right now. This is a guy that wanted to be, he talked before, he wanted to be one of the all-time greats. We haven't seen that so far. So this could serve, this early adversity in his career could end up being a blessing in disguise down the road, and that it gave him time to mature, to learn the professional game, how to be a pro. I think the addition of C.J. McCollum has been a godsend.
Yes.
If I'm Zion Williamson, I'm putting myself in his hip pocket. I'm listening to every word C.J. McCollum tells me, and they didn't have someone like that on the roster before. So I think this has worked out fortuitously, not only for the Pelicans lineup, but for Zion Williamson in particular.
Well, it says a lot about the kid if he can overcome the adversity also. Again, the adversity of the injury, all the bad press, everything that was going on. For a while there, it was bad press on New Orleans. That kind of flipped to bad press on Zion. But the other part of it is, look, we've seen all-time greats that have had problems with weight come into the league, take a couple years to kind of figure it out. Charles Barkley comes to mind, says what Moses Malone pulled him on the side and told him about, if he didn't get himself in shape, he'd be out of the league in a couple years. Took it to heart. You look at pictures of Barkley when he first came into Barkley a few years later, a lot like what we're seeing with Zion, right now in terms of his body type. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And again, if he is willing to commit to again, keeping himself in shape and continue to expand his game, because the sky's the limit for him in terms just his base, what he brings to the table in terms of just his base skill set.
Yeah, and look, I think in his defense a little bit, these lower leg injuries, the knee injury he had at Duke, the foot injuries he's had here, I mean that inhibits your ability to get in shape. You can't do much cardio. You can't do cardio. So once he got, that was the lesson or the instructions that internally they were giving him is you got to lose as much weight as possible because that's going to help your foot progress. Your injury on your foot is not going to heal as quickly if it's, trying to support all this weight. So they go hand in hand, and I think that was the frustration internally with the organization was with his weight. It was creating a longer delay in his recovery.
The team seems to once again be coming together. Last year it was the team having multiple practices. This year there's a lot of talk about Vegas, Phoenix, even going to Spain with Hernan Gomez for his camp, everybody getting together. The fact that, again, this is a team-led deal, the players is good. I like the fact that these guys are practicing and working out here in the city, which is something Zion has not done up until this point this year.
Yeah, and I think Zion, the one thing about him is he's passionate about playing. I mean, there's never been any question about his love of the game, getting caught up in some of the peripherals that happen to NBA stars. I think he's most at home when he's on the court with his peers. And so I think being a part of that, and then once he gets into the mix here, the more he's in, the more his natural leadership skills, the more his game will speak for itself. I mean, he's a unique talent. And once he's on the court, that comes out at him. He's kind of a shy guy in a way off the court. But when he's on the court, he's a lot like a lot of great athletes. That's where he's most comfortable. And look, I would like to see him, I've said this before, I would like to see him kind of do what the Saints do. Play a game at UNO's Lakefront Arena, a preseason game or a practice, have a public practice. Kind of get out of the community, do a few more things like that to kind of foster some fan interest.
And look, that he's doing it now, directly, indirectly, by going to a playground. There were shots of him early this year again, hanging out, on Britannia Street, going to different stores there. So he's out and about. He's here. He's said he wants to be a pillar of the community. He was a dry YMCA a couple weeks ago. Obviously, again with that. So he's doing his due diligence to be able to kind of change the narrative, which was needed, honestly.
Yeah, and look, I don't think he's ever not been in on New Orleans. I've never felt that way. If you know how he's wired, this is a kid from a rural town, small town in North Carolina. He went to high school in Spartanburg, South Carolina, picked Duke, Durham.
Right.
These are small towns. I don't think he's all caught up in going to these big. I think he's much more personality-wise, superstar-wise, more like a Tim Duncan than an Anthony Davis, who was caught up in the big lights.
Yeah, well, we've been very, very fortunate here in New Orleans when you talk about, superstar-type basketball players, from Pistol Pete Maravich to, again, you could say Baron Davis when they first brought the franchise here, Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, and now Zion Williamson. And I don't want to throw shade on Brandon Ingram, because again, he's a very, very good player. But again, we're talking real star status there when you start talking about those type of players. And by the way, Pete Maravich's 75th birthday yesterday. LSU announces they're going to put the statue in front of the PMAC, which is long overdue. I'm hoping they're going to be putting that jersey back in the Smoothie King Center, hanging that from the rafters again, since it's been retired by the Utah Jazz, the Pelicans, and also the Atlanta Hawks. But we've been fortunate here in New Orleans with some really good superstar players.
Yeah, and the falling in the lap, really.
Right.
Zion Williamson was just a miracle,
Yes.
almost.
Yes, it was.
Came right at the right time for the organization. I don't know where they would be without him.
Yep, no doubt. All right, we're going to take a break. We come back. We'll get into some Saints. We'll also talk a bit about what's going on at LSU and Tulane and with their football teams. We'll talk a bit about the College World Series. And, of course, we'll get to more of the collegiate game if we have time. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jeff Duncan of Dole.com, the Times-Picayune, the Advocate, and Fox 8 Sports is our guest. Don't go anywhere.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Jeff Duncan is our guest. Jeff, let's talk some Saints. Mini camp OTAs are over. They're on their break. Be going to camp at the end of July. Your impressions coming out of OTAs and mini camp, first of all.
Well, look, it's hard to make impressions on a team when they're in shorts and shirts.
Sure.
They're not really competing, really. Of
course.
I do think I'm a little concerned about some of the injuries. The fact that Mike Thomas still isn't out there, that Jameis Winston's still favoring his leg. Those things concern me. I may be alone in that, but that concerns me a little bit. But I do think this team has very few holes in the roster. I think they're clearly a better roster than they were at this time a year ago. But there's still, I think, a lot of questions. And so I'm hesitant to jump on board. I know everyone is optimistic this time of year, but I do think there's a lot of things that have to fall in line for this team to reach its potential. I think they can, and I think they've set it up well, but there's a lot of questions that have to be answered for this team, I think, to get back in the playoffs.
Let's talk about Dennis Allen first. There's a transition period here now going from Sean Payton to Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen is his own man. We know how he coached the defense. How do you think he approaches the head coaching job, and what type of coach will he be? Will he be an aggressive coach like Sean Payton? We already know it's going to probably be a collaborative with the offense. When you got co-defensive coordinators and your head coach will be a collaborative with the defense. How do you think he approaches the head coaching job his second time around? And what's his personality going to be?
Yeah, I don't think we know yet. I don't think any of us know. I think it's one of the more compelling things to watch this season. I'm going to be intrigued to see what he's like on fourth down. Will he roll the dice? Sean Payton was pretty aggressive in those situations. Yeah, I don't know if he can be as aggressive as Sean was in those situations. But I'm interested to see how he handles adversity. That was one of Payton's great strengths, was his ability to kind of rally the troops at the darkest hour. When hurricanes came and they got relocated, and a lot of people would use that as an excuse. So one of my great admirations of Sean Payton was he never made excuses, and I think we do that too much in this state. We do that too much in this city.
I agree.
We tend to play the victim card a lot. He never did that. I always admired that. And I do think Dennis Allen learned a lot of those traits from Sean Payton, so I think those will apply. But I have no idea what he's going to be like when the first major storm hits. And it's going to hit. It happens every year. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be adversity. So I'm eager to see it.
They've done everything they could to have continuity, from the coaching staff to try to keep the players together, keep the culture together. But at the end of the day, even Dennis Allen said it when he took the job. He's going to put his own stamp on this job. It's interesting to see again how much that's going to change from when Sean Payton was the head coach.
Yeah, and we've seen a few things like in practice. I noted this the other day. Sean would take maybe once every 2 practices or so, he would call the team, stop practice and call the team up, and there'd be a lesson he'd want the whole team to hear, and then they'd re-break and go back into practice. Dennis Allen does that a lot. He does it more than Sean Payton ever did. I mean, he does it multiple times during a given practice. That's just a small thing, but it is more of like a teaching type of element out there. There's not a lot of yelling at practice right now, at least the early practices I've seen. I think his staff, much like Sean Payton's, all about teaching, treating guys like professionals, and I think that's the way Dennis Allen will carry this forward.
We know there's co-defensive coordinators, and we know that, again, Dennis Allen's just going to continue to call the plays there. How is that going to work on game day? Who's going to be in the booth? Do we have any idea how that's going to work?
No. I know the other day DeMario Davis said that during practice right now, Ryan Nielsen's calling the defensive plays, but as I understand it, Dennis Allen is going to call them during the season. He's said that. So I don't know if he's just getting experience, much the way Sean Payton would give Pete Carmichael that experience, but I don't think any of that's been sorted out yet. Obviously, Pete Carmichael's going to call the offensive plays. I don't think there's any doubt. What I'm curious to see is, will they give the same amount of latitude to Jameis Winston at the line of scrimmage that they gave to Drew Brees late in his career? Is that something that's still going to evolve?
Can they at this point, though?
I don't know.
I mean, again, you're talking about Brees over a decade and more when he started to get that kind of, he got the responsibility early, but again, almost had to kind of prove that. And then you had a coach and a quarterback that they almost seem to be in unison, okay?
Right, but I would say this. I mean, that's the way the league's going. Just every team around the league now puts that on the quarterback's plate. And a lot of this is made at the last year. It's one of the reasons why you don't see the tempo. Like, when I was writing that book, Payton and Brees, early on in the Payton Brees tenure, when they were really rolling, 2009, 2011, they used the term blitz the defense. And they would get there and roll those personnel groups in and out. And they were putting the defense on their heels. And they evolved toward the end. They were one of the least fast-paced teams in the league. And that's because they would rather Drew Brees make that decision at the line of scrimmage, and they counted on him to get up there, survey the defense, get everybody set, and it took a long time for him to decipher it. He almost always got them in the right play, but the blitzing the defense kind of went by the wayside.
I found it interesting. Ricardo LeCompte had an interview with Ronald Curry, who's the offensive, who's the quarterback coach, but also the passing coordinator.
Right.
And he said that he felt it was going to be a collaboration on the game plan every week with Carmichael. The question I have is, where was the creativity? Is that Sean Payton only? Was that a collaboration between Carmichael and Payton when you talk about the wrinkles we saw every week? Or again, those plays that he'd come up with that we'd go, wow, that's an incredible play. You wrote the book. Was that Sean Payton or was that Carmichael and Payton? Was that a combination of Brees, Payton, and Carmichael?
Yeah, it's always a collaboration. I mean, yeah, everything the Saints did was collaborative. Matter of fact, that's one of the strengths of Sean Payton's coaching was He empowered all of his assistants, everyone in that room. I mean, Joe Brady was a low-level offensive assistant, and he had a voice in those meetings. And if he saw something, they would bring it up. So I think that's part of the culture of the New Orleans Saints that's happened under Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis. They want all these decisions to be collaborative, even draft day. When they select somebody, it's a group effort, and everyone's all in once they make that decision.
Let's talk about contracts. Demario Davis, next year is the last year of his deal. He'll be 34 in January. His cap hit next year is $13.2 million. He's got 3 dummy years left on the contract from renegotiating the deal to open up cap space. What do they do with him at 33, 34 years old? Do they extend him? Does it happen now? How do you think they handle it?
Well, I think he would certainly like it, get an extension now. There's a reason he wasn't at OTAs.
Yeah,
That was a message.
That was a message.
Yeah, but I think the way it's going to play out is going to be very similar to Drew Brees late in his career. We're going to look at one-year deals. The organization's going to make him what they consider a fair offer, but I don't think they can put themselves in a position to give him multiple long-term deals. Now, what I think is interesting from DeMario's perspective, there's no doubt he wants to be here long-term. He's found a home here. He loves it here. He's involved in the community. But his motivation, at least he has told me, beyond this year, is about these schools that he's building and the money that he earns in his next 2 years, that he thinks he can play 2 years after this season, so through 2024. He's playing for those schools.
So he's playing so he can fund those schools.
Right. So in his mind, and I understand it, he wants as much money as he can get.
Yes.
Because it's not about him.
No.
It's for these kids,
Understood.
for the schools.
Yeah.
So there may be a difference there. I mean, Mickey Loomis has got to protect the interests of the organization, but Demario Davis isn't playing for himself anymore. He's made enough money for his family.
Yes.
And his legacy now is going to be for these kids in the schools. They may be a difference there.
Yeah, well, maybe Ms. Benson can get involved with those schools as well. It could be a collaborative effort. Here's another one. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, last year of his deal, $2.7 million this year. What a lot of people don't realize, unrestricted free agent next year. Did they get this deal done before the season starts?
I'd be surprised. I don't think that's going to happen. Look, I'd have serious reservations about throwing long-term money to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He's a terrific player, but I think the Saints will make him an offer next year. I think they want to see how he plays this year, and I think they feel like they can find another C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the draft if they can't get him, to come to terms.
Right. One of the reasons why they maybe drafted Alontae Taylor?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you always can find another slot corner. He's a good one.
Right.
C.J. Gardner-Johnson brings a lot to the table for this defense in terms of energy and enthusiasm, but he's not the most dependable, reliable player, and I think they'd like to see more consistency from him, not only on the field, but off the field. And once he gets to that point, then maybe he warrants a long-term deal.
The other one is Deontay Hardy. And I mentioned this on last week's show. He's got a one-year, $3.2 million tender. But that makes him the second highest paid wide receiver on the team, even in front of Jarvis Landry, who's making $3 million. Of course, with incentives, he can make up to $6 million. He's probably not going to play as much wide receiver as he did last year with this group.
He will not. He definitely will not.
So how does that work out in your mind?
Well, I think it's exactly what it is. He's a role player, and the Saints will have a number for him, but it's not going to be as a receiver. He's going to be looked at as a return specialist, and they've got plenty of options on the roster. They may not have somebody as dynamic as Deontay Harris, but Hardy, he's proven to be injury prone. He's not a very big guy. He's battled injuries. That's going to hurt his leverage. So I would see this. I'd be surprised if he's not back here for another year beyond this year. But I think the long-term deal for a specialist is hard to find in this league.
I did want to ask you this because, again, you've been so close to Sean Payton again since he's been here. You've obviously written the book. The Payton to Dolphins story, 4 years, $100 million. Brady coming out of taking part ownership of the team, coming out of retirement to be the quarterback there. The reason why it didn't happen was the Flores lawsuit. What's your thoughts on that story?
I'm not sure I believe any of it. I don't have any doubt that Miami may have somebody internally may have wanted some of these things, but it's, look, wanting something and actually it being realistic. I mean, first of all, the Saints would have to let Sean Payton go.
Right.
I mean, they don't have to do anything.
Well, supposedly they denied the Dolphins any opportunity to speak with him.
Right. So it was never going to happen.
Right.
I mean, they own his rights. Now, same thing with Tom Brady. Tom Brady can't just retire and go to the Dolphins.
Right.
That doesn't work that way.
They own his rights.
Yes. So I mean, I don't. That's why I don't understand where all this is coming from. There's a lot of hoops that would have to be jumped through for any of it to happen. To me, it's just a bunch of it's what happens in this silly off-season time.
Let's talk about the Breakers for a moment. Again, they're in the USFL playoffs in Tom Benson Stadium up in Canton, Ohio. On Saturday night, they take on Birmingham, who they've lost twice to this season. The team they came in second to in the South. They're one of the Final Four teams, along with the Generals and the Stars. Your thoughts on the season? Your thoughts on them maybe advancing to a championship?
Well, I got to be honest. I haven't followed them like a team that would be based here.
I don't think any of us have.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, the way the league's set up, to me, this league is a lot like these off-season professional sports leagues. They're basically been invented for off-season television content.
Right.
There's not a lot. I mean, the fact that they're playing all their games in Birmingham tells you they don't care about the investment of the local. The local fan base.
At least they're trying to plant those seeds for the locals.
Yeah, but they're basically inventing. This has been created to get television advertising for content in the off season, and until they get beyond that and get rooted here, I'll have a hard time buying into that.
But it would be a nice way to introduce yourself to the fan base coming here as a champion next year if they do play.
Yeah, if they do.
They do play, and you would think it would be over at Tulane if they do play, right? Here?
Yeah, well, I have no idea where they play. I mean, it'd be the only option I think they could have.
Yeah, I would think so.
It feels to me like another one of those leagues that, we've seen a bunch of them the last few years, that it's about the TV advertising.
Right. It's made for TV football.
Yeah, it's less about it's less about the actual fan base. Until I can tell you this is the way I would judge it. When I go out to restaurants, when I go out to bars in the city, not that I go out to bars very much, but more restaurants. Grocery store, go get my haircut. I've never had one person ask me about the Breakers.
Right.
Not once. Yeah. You're the first person.
Right. Really? First?
First person. So there you go.
I'm over everything. everything. All right, Arkansas, Ole Miss tonight. Well, this afternoon, 3 o'clock. You have a chance to be able to play Oklahoma for the College World Series. So it's really Ole Miss has come from the dead.
Yep.
Your thoughts on the College World Series this year?
Well, they're a classic example. It happens almost every year in baseball where a team gets hot in the postseason, and that's the way baseball works. You get some hot bats, some hot arms, and to me, they almost feel like a team of destiny. But Arkansas, man, they have a lineup. Their offense is just incredible.
Yeah.
But I think what we've seen in this College World Series is a testament to the strength of the SEC, and in particular the SEC West. It's been dominated. It's dominating college baseball, and I think to some degree, I'm sure LSU fans want to be in that number, right?
Yeah.
They have expectations to be in that number, and I think that will eventually happen with Jay Johnson. But it just shows you also, Skip Bertman wasn't battling that type of competition when he built this program. Those programs were not like they are now, and it's just the way college baseball is. The landscape is much different.
Right, no doubt. Let's talk about Tulane. Big season for Tulane coming in for this football season with Willie Fritz, considering, again, last year, the drop, what everybody thought they were going to take the next step. They've done a pretty good job in recruiting, but the question is, can they take the next step? Now, I'm going to say this. After next year, they should be a team that should be competing for a championship in the American Athletic Conference every single sport, every single year. When you lose the type of programs you're losing and the programs you're bringing over from the CUSA, believe me, Tulane should be able to compete. It should be able to compete at a high level. So it'll be interesting to see, again, how this changes over the next 2 years in terms of the hierarchy of the American Athletic Conference and where Tulane is. With that said, this is a big year for Willie Fritz and the Tulane football program.
Yeah, he's had some turnover in his coaching staff, and I think he'd like to have more stability there. I think that's going to be important. But at a program like Tulane, I think you need a little more stability. Unfortunately, they've had a turnover with Will Hall and then Chip Long. I think that's probably hindered the progress of Michael Pratt. But I agree with you. I think indirectly, maybe a subtle benefit for Tulane football is Billy Napier going to Florida.
Yeah.
He built a power over there, and they were getting a lot of really good players, almost secondary players that that LSU passed over. That's where Tulane needs to be. We've talked about it in recruitment. I do think they've done a better job of building their lines there. That's something I've seen progress in. But there's still, that was a big step back they took last year. They lost a lot of close games, a lot of games late in the game. They've got to figure out a way to finish those games. But I do think Pratt gives them something they haven't had in a long time, an experienced, talented quarterback.
I talk to Tulane fans all the time about this. I know they're upset they didn't get a chance to go to the Big 12. They felt like, again, they were the market, etc. But again, they don't have a strong enough program across the board to be able to be invited into a Big 12. But this is an opportunity with this new American that's coming in for them to, over the next few years, build their cachet, have an opportunity to maybe win some championships. And the next, because we know there's going to be shuffling within the conferences once again very, very soon. And the next time this comes around, Tulane could be in a position that one of these major conferences may take Tulane on, considering again the market size, Tulane, etc. All the way around.
Well, and I think the future of college football is still evolving. I don't think we know where it's going to end up.
I agree.
We may end up with a 40-team super league, basically.
Right.
And Tulane will always be on the outside of that, I think. So where they position themselves 5 years from now, I think is going to be important. And I know Troy Dannon thinks about those things. But the shifting sands in college football are not done.
No, not at all.
And I'm not sure it's for the best, but it's inevitable.
But the American is going to be a weaker conference than it was previously. Okay,
Cincinnati, leaving, and Houston. Yeah, those are the powers.
Right, UCF. I mean, when that happens, again, you're in a position where if you're Tulane, you need to take advantage of that.
Yes.
And I'm talking about across the board when it comes to sports. And if you don't, that's going to say something about the program itself.
Well, in football drives everything in college sports. I mean, it's the money maker. It's why they have to continue to compete in football when actually they're probably up against it numbers wise. They're never going to be able to have the depth of these Power 5 programs. And that's ultimately the difference. It's a numbers game in football, and the big schools know it.
Right.
And I see it every year. I got a preseason magazine the other day at the newsstand, and I'm looking at some of these schools. Georgia has like 18 receivers, Eric. 18 on the roster. I mean, who needs 18 receivers?
The transfer portal.
Yeah, it's just there's just so much depth and numbers at these big schools.
But you know what? That's the difference there. Again, they changed the rules now with the transfer portal. We know that. But there's an opportunity, and Tulane's taking advantage of this year with guys that went to school in New Orleans, went elsewhere, didn't work out for them. They come back and play at Tulane. Now we're going to see again how they're going to perform there. But there's a second bite at the apple for Tulane where you look at the transfer portal. As long as these kids can get in school and handle the educational side.
Yeah, look, I think the establishment of the whole athletic program. I think they need to be better in some of these other sports. I think all that works together. We've had some turnover, we know, in the baseball program. I think Ron Hunter's done a good job. He's getting things back on track with basketball. They've got to be successful everywhere because I think that feeds into the perception of the entire program nationally.
Yeah.
So kids who want to go play football there, they want to see a thriving athletic department.
Because everybody's on TV now.
Correct.
I mean, it's not like, again, you want to go to a school to be seen. All games are on TV now. So again, your conference, your game, whether again it's on the internet or whatever, your game's being seen. You can be seen, and the pros will find you if you're a good player. It's about again the stability within the program. I agree. Let's talk some LSU. Who's the next quarterback?
I think it's going to be Miles Brennan. I think he's going to end up winning that job. If he doesn't win it, he may be stuck there.
Right.
But I think he's got the experience right now. I think the best quarterback is Garrett Nussmeier, and I think there's internally some people that are saying, let's go with this guy's going to be our long-term anser. Let's just go ahead and put him in there and live with some of the growing pains. But I think they've got a good situation there. I think they have experience. I think Jaden Daniels will be the guy they'll have a package for and utilize that, make people prepare for that. I'm actually a little more bullish on LSU
Me too.
this season than a lot of people are. I think they've got they could be a surprise team. I'm not sure the ceiling for this team. Maybe 9 wins would be the ceiling. But that's pretty darn good considering where they've come from. And it really shows you how far down the program was these last couple of years. The fact they had to take so many players from the transfer portal, that shouldn't be happening at LSU. And I haven't had a chance to meet with Brian Kelly yet, but I think one of the things I'm seeing early on from him is the CEO type of management of the
almost
program.
Saban-esque, right?
Yes, like he understands that you're running a major college company here, and hiring the coaching staff, all those things. That attention to detail is what Brian Kelly's going to bring to the table here. They're always going to recruit well. Kids want to play at LSU.
Yeah.
I used to always laugh, like, Les Miles is this great recruiter. I'm like, anyone can recruit at LSU. Kids want to play there.
Especially local kids.
I think the biggest issue they've got now is figuring out on the front end which of these kids can make it, which ones care about it. It reminds me a little bit about Jeff Ireland, how much work they do on the front end to find players where it means a lot to them. They've got to do that at LSU. There's too much turnover there. They get too many. Yeah, they get the 5-star recruits, and it looks good in the signing day. But how much attrition occurs?
True.
Because kids either can't handle the academic load, don't try to handle it, or can't get through the drug testing policies. That all should be
the field
handled.
issues.
Yeah, it should be handled on the front end, before they get to campus.
Yeah, I'm with you. But the landscape has changed, and here in Louisiana, the good thing happened in the last legislative session, where again the NIL laws have changed now here in the state. Louisiana schools can now directly or indirectly arrange for third-party compensation for student athletes through NIL. Even in high school now here in Louisiana, there's an ability for, again, student athletes to profit off the NIL. The collectives of boosters of business that cannot be involved in recruiting or in the transfer portal, that's another rule that has come down. But at least now Louisiana's in a position where they've helped their universities to be able to compete on the level of NIL. Obviously, it's going to be different for an LSU as opposed to a Louisiana Lafayette or some of the other schools. But at the same time, this was needed to happen for NIL to be able to flourish here in Louisiana and to be able to compete with the Texas A&Ms and, oh, by the way, the Texas and Oklahomas that are coming in the SEC very soon.
And look, I would like to see it, down the road, and I think it will down the road. I mean, there's got to be some kind of uniformity to all these. They can't go state to state and have different rules in different states. So I think at some point the NCAA needs to wrap their hands around
They're looking to Congress to do that. I mean, shouldn't the NCAA do that? I mean, you cannot, every time you can't figure it out, go to Congress and say, give us a federal law.
I agree, but I feel like the NCAA has been beaten up so much that they've kind of just said, okay, this is what you want.
Right.
We're washing our hands of it. Because I think
it's anarchy.
I think they knew it's like a lot of things. The NCAA is easy to beat up on.
Yeah.
It's like the IRS. They're a big faceless institution. It's easy to kick them around, but they know that once you give an inch in the hyper-competitive world of college sports, all these coaches will take a mile.
Yes.
And they know that's the way it happens with the NIL. It's how it's always happened with recruiting. They know that some of those rules are onerous. They know it looks bad. They probably want kids to be compensated to some degree. The problem is once you start opening up that can of worms, we see what happens. It's the Wild West.
Right. There are some that said that Louisiana is going to have a tough, LSU specifically, going to have a tough time competing with the Texases and the Texas A&Ms. Do you believe that?
Well, I think it's going to change. I don't know where we're going. I mean, my alma mater, University of Louisville, has got one of the top 12 recruiting classes in the country because of NIL.
Yeah.
They're getting kids they never got before because Adidas has gotten behind it and wants to pump money into the program. I think we're seeing a lot of shifting sands, and I don't know where it's going to end up. A school like Texas with unlimited resources, certainly, I think.
Look what A&M was able to do this past,
No question. So I do think it's going to change, but I also think there's going to be some pullback, too. I think we're going to see a lot of this money is going to not return on the investment, and I think we're going to see some lessons learned along the way.
Well, look, I think there has to be caps on the NIL, okay? And a lot of people say, why? Well, I mean, I think because, and I think that, I'd like to see this be able to be spread out throughout the team itself. We've seen that with some institutions where, again, everybody's getting a piece of the pie. And then we're already seeing now with the transfer portal, maybe tightening the rules a bit. So again, the first time something goes wrong at a school, you don't just jump in the transfer portal and you have the ability to go elsewhere. There's a time frame on it now to be able to transfer.
A lot of these NIL deals are over the course of your entire time. If you want to get the payout, you've got to stay.
You got to stay 3-4 years.
And I think that incentive is smart, and I like that.
Right.
But I'm old school, Eric. I mean, I'm starting to wonder. I think the athletes deserve compensation, especially when there's rules you can't get jobs.
Right.
I think there's got to be some form of compensation there. But I lean more toward your point of let's just compensate everybody, and that way I think we're going to develop some issues with certain players making money. There's going to be some jealousies in the locker room. What's the competition going to be like? I mean, like I said, Louisville, they've recruited this quarterback from California. I don't know how they can make him compete for the job.
Right.
They've rolled out the red carpet. They've put billboards up all over town with this kid's name on it. You telling me he's going to actually compete for the job now?
Well, and if you're investing in that athlete, you know, again, they came to you and said, we need this kid. Come up with the cash, and then again the kid's sitting the bench, and how's the kid again helping name, image, and likeness for this particular business if ultimately again he's not getting any playing time?
Great example. That's Miles Brennan, who signed big deals in Baton Rouge and still is yet to play yet. And if he gets beaten out for the job this year, I don't know how that plays out.
Yeah, and again it's a roll of the dice for the business as well. We've got about 2 minutes left. SEC. How much do you see this changing in terms of the conference? They're saying they're going to do away with the divisions. There might be 14 pods with rotating divisions. They're going to go to 9 conference games. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, well, I like that they're going to maybe eliminate the West Division, East Division. I think we're just going to see one big, huge division. But I think they've got to somehow adhere to those long-standing rivalries and traditions. I think they will. Like, I can't imagine Auburn and Alabama not being a part of the same pod.
Sure.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the West with, the addition of Oklahoma and Texas. Geographically, that adds an element where you have Texas A&M and Arkansas and Missouri. Missouri really, the more I look at it, feels like an outlier to me in the whole SEC. But I would love to see LSU maintain those traditional rivalry games with Alabama, certainly, Ole Miss. And I don't know how it's going to play out because I also like this rivalry with Texas A&M. So hopefully they preserve that somehow. But, man, the conference, I mean, tradition has not been something that college football cares about.
No, not anymore.
No, I mean, it's all kind of out the window, so it won't surprise me how it plays out.
And I'm hoping they're going to expand the playoffs, too. I mean, again, I know that there are some that feel that, again, that 4 or 8 teams is enough. I have no issue with, again, look, I think the more opportunities you get, it's better for TV. And of course, especially now, the way you have the have and have-nots in college football, it gives some of those lesser conferences an opportunity to get in.
I'm a 16-team playoff guy.
Me too.
Worked for the lower levels for years. It's more excitement. I think it would make college football more interesting.
Me too.
By bringing more parity to the sport, and I think they need more parity.
No doubt. Jeff, thanks as always. Certainly appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Jeff Duncan, Noel.com, advocate, Times-Picayune, and of course, check out all his books as well. He's got a new one coming for us very soon, if you can ever get away to be able to write the book. Right?
All
right, there you go. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. There should be a QR code coming up on your screen very soon. You can take your smartphone, click on that. It'll take you to the WLAE-TV YouTube page or to my website, ericasher.com. There's a myriad of ways for you to be able to catch our program. That should be up on your screen. We have probably more rebroadcast than any program on TV here in New Orleans. So, again, choose and pick where you want to check out the show. Again, set your DVR each and every week for Inside New Orleans Sports. You catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. I'm on 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. The Anchor app is our home base for our podcast. Podcast only goes up about 20 minutes after the show. But iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, digital platforms that you can also listen to the show if for some reason you're not within the listening area of the 106.1 strong signal. Also, I want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible. We appreciate each and every one of them. Please continue to support those great underwriters who, again, are a big part of why we are on the air. Also, the WLA production staff, which are outstanding and award-winning. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, also Logan Graffia, Alex Chacon, and award-winning director William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jeff Duncan, we'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.